So what we have here is a 2016 Ford Fusion XL Coupe Crowd Killer Edition. I'm just kidding, it's 2016 Mustang. And I guess I'm making this video as a means to kind of dispel a couple of inaccuracies that I've seen in a lot of oil change videos. So to get started, I always like to lay out everything I get. Starting with, we have some tape and a piece of cardboard, which I'll show you what that is for later. And I like to keep my stuff clean, so I got some super clean and some paper towels. Got my 15 millimeter, what is that, 3/8 ratchet, and a 7 millimeter on a 1/4 inch ratchet, and that's going to be for the belly pan. And the 15 millimeter is going to be for the drain plug. And I also have a torque wrench. Yes, I use a torque wrench to tighten down my oil pan drain bolt, and I'll explain why later. Now, as far as oil filter choice, nowadays you can't really go wrong unless you use some super cheap filter that's garbage. I prefer to use either a Royal Purple oil filter, Motorcraft by Ford, or a AMSOIL. AMSOIL and Royal Purple are pretty much the same. The only main differences being the color and the packaging. Otherwise, they're virtually the same. Now, if you do buy a Royal Purple oil filter, you're going to want to make sure that you buy it in person. I wouldn't recommend buying these online, and the main reason for that is because they don't seal these and they can rust. And if you look at this one, it's pretty clean. There's a couple specks right here, but there's been a few I had to take back because I would open them after I got home or after I ordered them on Amazon, only to realize they are rusted. So if you buy these, make sure they're not rusted. And the reason I like to use the Royal Purple is because I use a synthetic media. I've researched oil and oil filters for a good bit of time over the past few years, and these seem to do the job the best in my opinion. Now, as far as oil choice, I prefer to use Pennzoil Ultra Platinum 5W20, which is what the, whoops, calm down. I like to use 5W20, which is what the manufacturer recommends. I'm not going to use anything other than that because this is a daily driver, as you can see by the bugs on the front. And so it doesn't make any sense for me to use like 540 or anything heavy because I don't need it. And I like to keep my intervals around 6,000 to 7,000 miles. I believe it's a waste of money to change it any sooner than that for a car that doesn't see any track duty, which this one hasn't as of yet, may in the future. But anyway, the reason I like to use Pennzoil Ultra Platinum is because out of the internet research I've done and checking out oil analysis on previous vehicles that I've had and accumulating all that information together, this is pretty much going to be your best bang for the buck. I ordered this on Amazon. I can't remember the price, but compared to AMSOIL, it's, I want to say, 15 to 20 bucks cheaper. So as far as value goes and performance, it's really hard to beat the stuff. Now, you can see I have two oil pans here. First time I changed the oil, I used that oil pan because I'm used to changing oil on Hondas. This car takes 8 quarts. That's a 5-quart pan. Do the math, and you can kind of figure out what happened. So I only use that pan to change my oil filter so I can drain the oil and the oil filter at the same time without having to share the same pan. You don't have to do that, it's just a little extra thing I like to do. And of course I got my broken ass Harbor Freight Creeper. It's garbage, don't buy those. The caster broke off on that side, so it kind of gets stuck at times. I have my jack stand. I do have another one, of course. I'm not just going to use one jack stand. Please do not take Scotty Kilmer's advice and only use a jack to hold your car up in the air. I heard getting squished by a car doesn't feel too great. Also, make sure that if you're going to use these kinds of drain pans, that the cap isn't broken. There's been plenty of times where I've seen these in stores with the cap that has been over tightened and this part will be sticking out at the bottom or something like that. So, and also I will be collecting a oil sample for, what is this, Blackstone? I believe it's for Blackstone. Get it to focus, or maybe not. I'm getting an oil analysis to check the condition of the car. It's only at 13,000 miles. And before I do any modifications to it, engine-wise, I want to make sure it's running the best way possible. Now, is this going to be the end-all be-all to determining if your engine's in the best shape? Absolutely not. The only way you're going to be able to tell is to disassemble it, and of course I'm not going to do that. But it'll give you a good idea of how your engine is doing. It'll be able to tell you if you have issues with bearings failing prematurely, because it'll show what kinds of wear metals are in the oil and whatnot. So I figured it's worth it, what, 30, 35 bucks to get an idea of how my oil's looking. And also it'll tell you if you can go a little further with your oil changes and whatnot. So to get started, I'm gonna go ahead and jack up the car using this old beat up Harbor Freight jack I have. And I'm gonna put it on these jack stands. And also it's a good idea if you're just gonna lift the front of the car up to chalk your wheels. So I'm gonna do that and be right back. All right, so we've got the car jacked up. And always be sure to at least pull up your handbrake. And if you have a manual, go ahead and put the car in gear. That way, in case it does roll back, if it is in gear, it'll hopefully catch it before it falls off the jack stands. Although if you jack your car on a level surface, you shouldn't have that problem. And also, I would highly suggest getting the steered jacking rails. As you can see, mine are kind of beat up because of speed bumps, and they're a little bit rusted. Wish I would use a little bit better types of steel for those, but for the price, they're really hard to beat when it comes to jacking up your car. And it's this black bar that goes from here all the way down, and it makes it to where you can jack up one side of the car and put 2 jack stands on it and set it down. So it makes jacking up the car a lot easier if you want to put all 4 wheels up in the air. Now, those of you with a performance pack, it's going to look a little bit different because you're going to have a little separate doorway here to access the oil filter. But for us base model plebes, you're going to want to use a 7mm socket to remove this screw right here. There's one over here, and there is one here and one here. So I'll do that. Now, once you've taken out all the screws for the belly pan, you should just be able to pull down around this area, and it should pop out like that. And then you just pull towards the back of the car. And this is a good time to have on safety glasses, and I just missed a screw, so I'll be right back. Alright, so I've pulled that other screw out. Try to keep all your stuff in one place so you don't have to spend 20 minutes searching for it when you get done. And you should just be able to pull back, and there you go. And here is your oil filter tucked up underneath here. This is your electric power steering module. I want to keep that dry, so I'm going to show you where that tape and cardboard I showed you earlier comes into play. Alright, now there's multiple ways you could do this. I've seen people take Ziploc bags and put them around the oil filter, but I prefer to use a piece of cardboard and tape it to the adapter for the oil cooler. Kind of hope this shows well on camera. Kind of confined for space, so hopefully get an idea of what I'm doing here. That way, once I unscrew the oil filter, it'll just kind of slide down the cardboard and into the pan instead of all over these lines, which doing that 20 or 30 times over the life of the car may not be too good for these. So, and of course your old drain pan bolts back here, so I'll get to that in a minute. But first, let's unscrew this. Now, as far as oil filter wrenches, I think there's a company called Lyle. Makes these claw type spring-loaded filters, or claws, oil filter wrench adapters, whatever you call them. And it kind of just clamps onto the back of the oil filter. This is going to be a tight fit because this is larger than factory. Well, the oil filter is. So it goes on here like so. And that way, you just put your ratchet on the back, which is going to be a really tight fit, and you just unscrew it. And it's way easier than trying to do it by hand or use one of those cheap metal adapters that end up stripping themselves on the paint part of the oil filter. Okay, so here's how the arrangement looks. If you can get a good idea of how to unscrew it. So I will go ahead and unscrew this and show you what it looks like after. Okay, so we've gotten the oil filter loose. As you can see, it's draining and the oil is running down my little makeshift ramp. You will get some on this, what is this, K-member? This piece right here. And that's what the super clean is for, to wipe down when we get done. But I'm going to let that finish draining and then I'll unscrew it all the way and move on to the oil pan drain bolt. Okay, so I got the oil filter off, pulled off my little makeshift oil ramp. And by the way, don't use painter's tape, it won't stick very well. As soon as oil hits it, or if there's dirt on the oil filter adapter, man, I can't talk right today. If there's dirt on the oil filter adapter, it won't stick, so just use duct tape or something stickier. And this is what it looks like. I'm gonna get a little bit of super clean once it finishes draining all the way and clean that up a little bit, and then I'll show you what to do next. One of the issues I've read about with the 5-liter Coyotes is the barbecue tick. And most people that complain about it say that it usually happens after the first oil change. So my theory is that these people aren't filling their oil filter with oil before reinstalling it on the engine. So what I do is I put a funnel in here, grab my oil, try to unscrew it with one hand and probably fail at it. Spill oil everywhere. Okay. What I like to do is fill this up as much as possible with oil without spilling it on the side. So once you get oil on the side of the filter, it makes it extremely difficult to tighten it down. By the way, don't pour your oil like this. Turn it around so you're less likely to drip it everywhere. Like that. So we're gonna fill this up and install it on the car. Oh, and by the way, you'll see it fills up and then it drains back down. That's because it's going through the filter media, so you're gonna have to do that a few times to make sure it's full all the way. Just don't overfill it. And it's a good idea to put a little oil on this ring right here. It's mainly to make it easier to get off the next time. It's not so much to make a better seal, as some may say. It's still gonna seal as long as you don't over tighten it and pinch this O-ring here. So like I said, it's mainly just to make sure that you can get it off easier the next time you remove the oil filter. And it can help with pinching and stuff like that, but I don't think that's the main reason you want to do it. Now the filter is full of oil and we just have to install it. As far as tightening it down, I just tighten it as tight as I can get it by hand. I never have any issues getting it back off because the claw I showed you earlier works pretty darn well. And I like to make sure my filter's on pretty tight. Last thing I want is it unscrewing itself as I'm driving down the road and then lose all my oil pressure. And this is about the most I'm gonna get in this filter. The challenge is getting it into place and screwing it on without spilling any down the sides, because once you do that, you're gonna have to use a whole lot of this in order to clean it up enough to be able to tighten it down without your hand sliding everywhere. Alright, so I got the oil filter on. Turns out the amount I added was a bit too much because, you know, this is kind of slanted off, so when you go to put it on, some of it pours out. So don't add quite that much, or else you'll end up like me and getting oil on this line here and then getting it all down your filter. So I had to clean that up in order for me to be able to tighten it down without my hand slipping everywhere. So I got that done. Just got to do the oil pan drain bolt, and I'm also going to collect an oil sample, which I'll show you a little bit later. So I'll get to that. Alright, so we've got the oil draining here. Now some people will say you need to have the car running a while and warm it up before you drain your oil. It's not 100% necessary. It does help it drain a little bit faster, but either way the oil is going to drain out if you give it enough time. And you may have noticed I've only had the front of the car jacked up. If you look at where the oil is draining, that's why I jacked it up that way, so it'll drain a little bit extra out. You don't have to jack up the back of these cars to get all the oil out. At least I don't think you do. And as far as undoing the oil cap to help prevent, I guess, gurgling, the crankcase isn't sealed, so you don't need to do that. It's not really necessary. You can if it helps you feel better, but it doesn't do anything. Because as you can see, I don't know if you're able to notice, but it wasn't gurgling or anything like that. So, but as soon as this finishes draining, I'm gonna clean off my drain bolt here, and then I'm gonna use a torque wrench to tighten it down. I do use a torque wrench to tighten down an oil pan drain bolt. Yeah, I know some people are gonna make fun of me. So what? I have a tendency to over tighten things because I'm a spaz. So I like to make sure that everything's at the right spec it should be. And I believe this is supposed to be torqued down to 18 foot-pounds. So. Alright, so I got my drain bolt hand tight, and I'm gonna go ahead and torque it down with a torque wrench. Again, this is 18 foot-pounds. So. And it's not very much. As you can see, I'm barely putting any pressure on this whatsoever. And that's it. Now I'm gonna go ahead and put the belly pan back on here. If you're kind of worried about if you've tightened the oil filter enough or not, you can leave it off until you start up the car. Just make sure you put oil in it first. It takes 8 quarts, but I'm not really worried about it leaking. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put this belly pan on and then go ahead and go to the top and fill the crankcase back up with oil. We've got the car back down on the ground. Please excuse my hideously dirty engine bay. And what I'm gonna do next is check my oil catch can. I have not checked it since the last oil change. It's been about, I wanna say 6,500 miles. So I'm gonna go ahead and undo these 2 Allen screws and take these off. You're supposed to be able to unscrew it and take it out, but as you can see, there's like no room to take the catch can out without taking these hoses off and everything else. So I'll do that and we'll see how much oil we have in there. Alright, so I got the catch can out. And you're gonna need a 2.5 millimeter Allen key in order to unscrew the 2 screws on top, and just a flathead screwdriver to undo these hose clamps. So I'm gonna try to find a clear container to see how much oil we've collected in this catch can. Feels like we got a decent amount in there, so I'll be right back. Alright, I found a container to put the whatever we collected in here in. And I've unscrewed the container, so let's see how much we got. Well, it looks like we got a decent amount here. And I do like the Mishimoto catch can. I like how the lines are a little bit longer so that the oil vapors have enough time to cool down before they reach the catch can itself and be able to collect at the bottom of the catch can. And this looks like quite a watery mixture. I'll pour it out in a second. But like I said, the hits I have against it are the fact that you have to undo all of this just to undo the catch can. Whereas if you have something like the JLT catch can, which goes from like here to here, you literally just unscrew it and bam, you're done. This requires tools, which is not the best situation I always have. So anyway, let's see how much we got. Pretty decent amount. To be honest, I expected a little bit more. But then again, I've been fairly lucky with this car as far as not burning a lot of oil. And the last oil change, it didn't collect a ton of it. So it could be that some of it is still bypassing the catch can. Some of the oil vapors and gases are still bypassing the catch can. Or it could be, yeah, that could be the case. I do see a little bit of oil on this return line to the intake manifold here. I don't know if you can see it in there, but there's a tiny bit. Or it could just be that there's just not a lot to collect. So I'm gonna clean this all up, put it back together, and then we'll fill the crankcase back up with oil. By the way, a good tip is if you're wearing gloves while you're working on your car and they get oily, what I like to do is just spray the gloves while they're still on my hands with this super clean, or any all-purpose cleaner will work, and kind of wash my hands with the all-purpose cleaner and then dry them off with a shop towel or rag, whatever you have that's clean, and they're no longer oily. But back to the Mishimoto catch can. Another thing I don't quite like about it is that these plastic fittings right here that screw into the catch can itself tend to work themselves loose. I've tried putting a little Teflon tape. I think I'm going to try something else after this, because they work themselves loose and the oil vapor escapes. As you can see, it's kind of wobbly there. And you can't over tighten them because they're plastic. So again, that's just one of the other things I don't quite like about the Mishimoto catch can. Other than that, the fitment could be a little bit better. I'm not gonna be too picky about that. It doesn't bother me. So I do like the catch can. It does its job, obviously, because we've caught a good bit of oil. Now, I don't drive the car super hard. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like to do some pulls every now and then, but I'm not taking it to the track or anything just yet. But I do about 70% city and 30% highway driving, so this is about what you'll get with that in a Mishimoto catch can. That's 6,500 miles, 7,000 miles maybe. But next, we're gonna fill up this crankcase. And I do find this annoying about this engine, that the oil fill is off at an angle. So when you put your funnel in, this happens. Damn it, Ford. Another tip, if your oil has been sitting for a while, mix it up a little bit. Sometimes the additive package may settle, especially if it's been sitting for a long time. Doesn't hurt to just shake up the bottom. Oh, and these are all the same. This is just old label, new label. So I'm gonna finish adding the 8 quarts to this thing and we'll fire up. So we've added our 8 quarts in. Time to start the car up. Already at normal. Great. Also, this is a good time to look underneath the car and make sure that you don't have any oil leaks. So I'm gonna do that now. So now I'm gonna let the engine warm up, and once it gets up to temp, shut it back off again, check the oil level, and see where it's sitting. Get it to focus here. You can see it's a little bit low. So I'm gonna add about half quart and see where it sits. I added about a half quart of oil and it's right at the full line. So looks like we're good to go. It's my first time making a video of this sort, so I appreciate you checking it out, watching it. If you got some constructive criticism, just go ahead and leave a comment down below. And thanks for watching.